All right, so in this video, I'm going to talk about the profitability index or the benefit cost ratio. So the profitability index or benefit cost ratio is basically looking at sort of how much present value we get in return relative to the present value of whatever it was spent to initiate a project. So basically to calculate the profitability index, what we're going to do is we're going to take the present value in and we're going to divide it by the present value that went out, and we're going to see basically where we wind up. Now, if you think about it, kind of makes sense that I would want the present value that's coming in to be higher than the present value going out. So we like a profitability index that is greater than 1. So that would be something that would increase shareholder wealth. So in other words, I'm receiving more in terms of present value than I paid out to do the project. Now, if I'm doing present values, I have to have a discount rate. So if I have to have a discount rate, the discount rate we're going to use is the risk-adjusted cost of capital, or in other words, the required rate of return that's relevant to the project. So that's what we're going to use for the project. The risk-adjusted cost of capital or required rate of return. I use that to convert the present value or convert the cash flows into present values. Then I take the present values that's coming in divided by the present value going out. There's a profitability index. Now, if the project has normal cash flows, and what I mean by that is we spend money at time 0 and then it's only positive cash flows after that. If that's true, then you can calculate that profitability index by basically taking the net present value, dividing it by the absolute value of the initial outlay, and just adding on 1. Okay. So let's kind of take a look and see how this works. Okay. So I'm calculating the profitability index or benefit cost ratio. Okay. So if I'm calculating that, I'm going to take the present value in divided by the present value that's going out. So I'm going to sum all of these present values that we had here. So that was the present value that are coming in. And then I'm going to divide it by the present value that's going out. Now, in this case, this is showing up as a negative, but the fact that I'm putting it in the denominator means that I'm recognizing this is an outflow. So for my ratio to work out correctly here when calculating this profitability index, I need to make that a positive number. So I'm going to put a negative sign in front of that initial outlay, basically to make sure that it is reflected as just the amount that was expended in present value terms. So I got the present value that's coming in the numerator, present value that's going out in the denominator. And I get a profitability index of 1.34, which is not dollars. It's saying that basically for every dollar I spent on the project, I got $1.31 back in terms of present value. Now, if I had some other negatives out here, let's say this cash flow here was a negative 30, to calculate the profitability index, I need to have the present value that's coming in divided by the present value that's going out. So I would need to find the present value of that negative 30, combine it with the negative 100 to find the total present value that's going out. And then I would need to take the positive present values, put those together to get the present values coming in. So just be careful if you've got some negatives out there in the future when you're calculating the profitability index or benefit cost ratio. But if I only have normal cash flows, which is pretty typical, where I have an initial outlay at time 0 and then only positive cash flows after that, I can also calculate the profitability index or benefit cost ratio by calculating the net present value. So I can take the net present value, which I calculate up here, divide it by the absolute value of the initial outlay, which there's a function for that in Excel, ABS. So take the absolute value of the initial outlay, and then I'm going to add 1 to it. Okay, and so that was the formula that I had in the bottom of the slide. So I take the net present value divided by the absolute value of the initial outlay plus 1. This calculation will work as long as I only have positive cash flows after the initial investment. So I calculate it, and it's giving me all kinds of extra decimal places, but if I make that more uniform, sure enough, 1.31. So my benefit cost ratio or profitability index in this case is 1.31. Now, back to what I had before. So if the profitability index is greater than 1, that means we're getting more present value coming in than the present value that went out. So we are increasing shareholder wealth, and we would accept. Now, you might be thinking, doesn't that kind of sound like net present value? Well, it does, but it turns out you could have projects that have the same net present value that have very different profitability indices. So here's what I mean by that. So let's suppose I had one project that was going to cost me $100 million to do, and I'm going to receive in terms of present value terms $101 million back. So $101 million comes in, $100 million went out. My net present value, $1 million. What if I had another project that was going to cost me $10 million to do, and I'm going to get $11 million back? Well, in terms of present value terms. Well, present value coming back in, 11 million. Present value going out was 10 million. So in that case, my net present value, $1 million. But if you calculate the benefit cost ratio for the two, that second example is going to have a much higher benefit to cost ratio because I'm getting that net present value with a much smaller initial investment. And that's why the profitability index or benefit to cost ratio is interesting. And that's how it adds on to what net present value tells us. Because I could have two projects that have the same net present value and very different profitability index values. So that's why we care about the profitability index or benefit to cost ratio. Hopefully this video has been helpful. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.